Throughout history, narratives of celestial beings descending to Earth have captivated human imagination, weaving tales of intrigue, morality, and the eternal struggle between obedience and desire. Among these, the account detailed in the Book of Enoch, particularly in chapters 6 to 8, stands out as a profound exploration of angelic transgression and its ramifications on humanity. This ancient text, though not included in the canonical Bible, offers a compelling perspective on the origins of evil and the complexities of free will, the flourishing of humanity and the dawn of innocence. The narrative begins in an era where humanity was experiencing exponential growth. Men and women multiplied, communities thrived, and a sense of purity permeated the earth. The daughters of men were described as not only beautiful in appearance but also in spirit, embodying innocence, virtue, and righteousness. It was a time when sin had not yet cast its long shadow over mankind, and harmony prevailed. This depiction serves as a poignant reminder of the inherent goodness that once defined humanity. It beckons us to reflect on our origins, to recognize the purity that resides within, and to strive towards reclaiming that lost innocence in our contemporary lives. The Watchers, guardians turned transgressors. Amidst this idyllic setting, a group of angels known as the Watchers were assigned the sacred duty of observing and guiding humanity. Tasked with non-interference, their role was to watch over mankind, ensuring its well-being from a distance. However, as they beheld the beauty and virtue of the daughters of men, a forbidden desire began to take root within them. This internal conflict highlights a universal theme: the battle between duty and desire. Even beings of divine origin were not immune to temptation, underscoring the pervasive nature of such struggles. It prompts us to consider our own challenges in adhering to moral and ethical boundaries, especially when faced with alluring deviations. Semjaza, the reluctant leader or the cunning instigator. At the forefront of this unfolding drama is Semjaza, the leader of the Watchers. Presented with the proposition of descending to Earth to unite with human women, Semjaza exhibits hesitation. He expresses concern about bearing the sole responsibility for this transgression, fearing the weight of divine punishment. His apprehension can be interpreted in multiple ways. On one hand, it portrays a leader torn between his duty and emerging desires, aware of the grave consequences that might ensue. On the other, it could be seen as a strategic move to gauge the commitment of his peers, ensuring collective culpability rather than solitary guilt. This duality in Semjaza's character serves as a mirror to our own decision-making processes. How often do we seek consensus to diffuse personal responsibility? How do we navigate the thin line between leadership and manipulation? The binding oath, a pact of rebellion. In response to Semjaza's concerns, the other Watchers propose a binding oath, a mutual agreement to act collectively, ensuring that no one bears the burden alone. This pact solidifies their decision, marking a definitive shift from passive observers to active participants in defiance of divine decree. The act of swearing an oath, especially one that contravenes established authority, underscores the gravity of their choice. It reflects the human tendency to seek solidarity in wrongdoing, believing that shared guilt is more bearable than isolated culpability. This moment in the narrative challenges us to reflect on our alliances and the commitments we make. Are they rooted in righteousness, or do they serve as veils for our transgressions? Descent to Mount Hermon, the point of no return. With their pact sealed, the 200 Watchers descend upon Mount Hermon, a location that would forever be etched in infamy. The mountain's name itself becomes symbolic, representing the oath taken and the monumental breach of trust that followed. Their descent signifies more than a physical relocation. It embodies a spiritual and moral fall from grace. By choosing to abandon their celestial posts and indulge in earthly desires, the Watchers set into motion a series of events that would alter the course of human history. Mount Hermon thus stands as a testament to the consequences of forsaking one's purpose. It serves as a stark reminder of the perils that accompany the pursuit of forbidden desires and the cascading effects of such choices. Unions with mortal women, the birth of the Nephilim. Upon reaching Earth, the Watchers take human wives, leading to the birth of the Nephilim, giant beings of immense strength and insatiable appetites. These offspring, born of unnatural unions, become agents of chaos, consuming vast resources and eventually turning against humanity itself. The emergence of the Nephilim illustrates the unforeseen consequences of transgressions. What began as a pursuit of desire culminated in the creation of entities that brought devastation upon the very world the Watchers were meant to safeguard. This segment of the narrative urges us to consider the long-term ramifications of our actions. It emphasizes the importance of foresight and the potential for unintended outcomes when we deviate from our moral compass. The introduction of forbidden knowledge. Beyond their physical unions, the Watchers impart forbidden knowledge to humanity. They introduce arts and sciences that, while advancing human capabilities, also pave the way for moral decay. Skills such as weapon making, enchantments, and cosmetic enhancements become double-edged swords, tools of progress tainted by the potential for misuse. This dissemination of knowledge raises ethical questions about the boundaries of human advancement. It challenges us to ponder the responsibility that comes with power and the discernment needed to wield newfound abilities wisely. Reflections on the nature of temptation and free will. The tale of the Watchers serves as a profound exploration of temptation and the exercise of free will. It reveals that no being, regardless of its divine origin, is immune to desire. However, it also underscores the agency inherent in choice, the ability to resist or succumb, to uphold duty or pursue forbidden paths. In our own lives, this narrative resonates deeply. We are continually faced with choices that test our values and commitments. The story of the Watchers encourages introspection, urging us to recognize our vulnerabilities and to strive for integrity amidst the allure of deviation. Lessons in leadership and collective responsibility. Semjaza's role and the collective decision of the Watchers highlight themes of leadership and shared responsibility. A leader's influence can steer others toward righteousness or ruin, and collective agreements can either uphold or undermine moral standards. This aspect of the narrative prompts us to evaluate the leaders we follow and the groups we align with. Are they guiding us toward ethical pursuits, or are they leading us astray? Moreover, it challenges those in positions of authority to wield their influence with wisdom and accountability. The ripple effects of transgression. The cascading consequences of the Watchers' actions, from the birth of the Nephilim to the importation of forbidden knowledge, illustrate the far-reaching impact of individual and collective transgressions. One act of defiance set off a chain reaction that corrupted humanity and disrupted the natural order. This serves as a cautionary tale about the potential magnitude of our choices. It reminds us that our actions, no matter how private or personal they may seem, can have broader implications, affecting not only our lives but also the lives of others. And as the ancient world slipped further into shadow, the consequences of the Watchers' betrayal began to unravel in terrifying ways. What started as a forbidden desire had now morphed into an unstoppable tide of corruption, violence, and despair. The earth, once a place of harmony and innocence, was descending rapidly into chaos. And while humanity struggled to make sense of its new reality, the heavens, silent until now, began to stir. The Nephilim's tyranny, giants with an unquenchable hunger. The Nephilim, offspring of the union between the Watchers and human women, grew into towering beings, giants who consumed the land, the animals, and eventually mankind itself. These creatures were not merely large in size, but monstrous in behavior. Their hunger knew no bounds. What they could not eat, they destroyed. What they could not rule, they crushed. Their mere presence reshaped the balance of life on Earth. Imagine living in such a world, waking each day not only to the threat of war or famine, but to towering beings who could extinguish entire villages in moments. These were not just mythic beasts, they were divine aberrations. Humanity, once cherished and watched over by celestial beings, now lived in terror of their corrupted children. And here lies one of the great ironies and lessons of this tale. That which begins with love, or what is mistaken for love, can turn into destruction when born out of selfishness and defiance. The Watchers may have convinced themselves they were acting out of affection, curiosity, or admiration for humanity, but the results spoke for themselves. The Nephilim were not miracles. They were the echoing judgment of unholy union. The corruption of mankind, knowledge as a double-edged sword. While the giants ravaged the earth, the Watchers also sowed subtler seeds of destruction. Knowledge. But this wasn't enlightenment or wisdom guided by divine intent. No, the Watchers introduced secrets humanity was never meant to bear, at least not yet. Azazel, one of the most infamous Watchers, taught men how to forge weapons, swords, knives, and shields. He showed them how to mine the earth for precious metals, how to polish them until they shone, how to fashion them into instruments of death. This was more than education, it was the fast-tracking of war. To the women, the Watchers gave cosmetics and enchantments, charms and bracelets, secrets of adornment and manipulation. They were taught not just how to beautify, but how to seduce and beguile, to use appearance as a weapon in its own right. The lines between beauty and deceit, between art and temptation, were blurred. This is where the tale becomes profoundly philosophical. Is knowledge inherently good or evil? Or is it neutral, shaped by the intent of its bearer? The Book of Enoch seems to suggest that timing and purpose are everything. What the Watchers gave was not just knowledge, it was premature power without spiritual maturity. Humanity was handed tools of war, seduction, sorcery, and pride without the moral compass to guide their use. And we must ask ourselves, isn't that still the challenge of our modern world? We too live in an age of rapid advancement. New technologies and powers emerge daily, and with them questions of ethics, responsibility, and wisdom. The ancient warning of the Watchers is as relevant now as ever. Knowledge without wisdom is dangerous. Power without restraint is a curse. Heaven's awareness, the sorrow of the archangels. As the earth groaned under the weight of sin and sorrow, the cries of the suffering reached the heavens. It is here that we are introduced to the great archangels, watchers of the Watchers, so to speak. Among them were Michael, Raphael, Gabriel, and Uriel, names that echo across cultures and religious traditions, often associated with protection, healing, judgment, and revelation. These angels were not blind to what had transpired. They saw the brokenness of earth, the weeping of innocent souls, the desecration of what was once a divine masterpiece. But more than that, they felt grief, divine sorrow. It's a powerful concept, that the heavens do not just judge, they mourn. This detail is deeply moving. It challenges the image of a cold, distant God who deals only in wrath. Instead, we are shown a heaven that listens, that aches, that waits before it acts. It reminds us that divine justice is not merely about punishment, it is also about healing what has been broken. The archangels, upon witnessing the full extent of the Watchers' rebellion, finally lift their voices before the Almighty. They petition not just for vengeance, but for intervention, for the earth to be restored, for humanity to be saved from further ruin. God's judgment begins, divine decree against the Watchers. In response to the archangel's plea, the Most High, the Eternal One, issues a decree that will alter both the heavens and the earth. To Raphael, he commands the binding of Azazel. This rogue angel, who spread war and vanity among men, is to be cast into a dark pit in the desert Dudiel and covered with jagged stones, to await the final judgment. To Gabriel, he assigns the task of destroying the Nephilim by setting them against one another in brutal civil war. The giants, born in violence, are to perish by the very violence they unleashed. To Michael, he commands the binding of Simjaza and the rest of the Watchers. They are to witness the death of their monstrous sons, to be imprisoned beneath the earth, in darkness and isolation, until the day of the great judgment. This moment is one of both justice and tragedy. For even as divine order is restored, the consequences are irreversible. The Watchers, once majestic beings of light, have fallen beyond redemption. Their punishment is not just physical imprisonment, it is the eternal awareness of what they once were and what they chose to become. And what of the Nephilim? Their destruction is not merely vengeance, it is a mercy to the earth, a purging of what should never have existed. It is a cosmic reset, a painful, necessary healing. The ripple effects: when heaven acts, earth trembles. As the divine judgments unfold, the earth itself reacts. The waters flood, the mountains tremble, and the sky darkens. Nature reflects the spiritual war being waged. The imbalance caused by the Watchers had not only corrupted mankind, it had disturbed the very fabric of creation. It's a potent image, that spiritual sin has environmental consequences, that what begins in the soul can manifest in the soil. Modern thinkers often separate the material from the spiritual, but the Book of Enoch refuses to do so. It shows a cosmos in which everything is interconnected, where heavenly rebellion leads to earthly suffering. This holistic view is powerful. It reminds us that our moral failures ripple outward, affecting families, communities, and even the natural world. When we act out of pride, greed, or lust, we don't just harm ourselves, we shake the world around us. Reflections: what can we learn from the fall of the Watchers? The story of the Watchers is more than ancient mythology, it's a mirror held up to the human soul. It speaks to our temptations, our hungers, and our potential for corruption. But it also speaks to hope, to the possibility of justice, and to the certainty that wrongdoing will not go unanswered. We live in a world that still echoes the ancient themes of Enoch's vision. We too are gifted with knowledge, power, and agency. And like the Watchers, we are called to choose how we use them. Will we pursue selfish desires at the cost of others? Will we manipulate the sacred for temporary pleasure? Or will we remain watchful, not over others, but over our own hearts? The earth in anguish, a world crying out for deliverance. By the time the divine judgments against the Watchers were set in motion, the earth had become unrecognizable. It groaned under the weight of bloodshed, betrayal, and unnatural power. The Nephilim, with their insatiable appetites and brutal rule, had turned paradise into a wasteland. The once sacred bond between heaven and earth had been desecrated, and humanity born in innocence now lived in fear, caught between celestial rebellion and terrestrial tyranny. The Book of Enoch paints a picture not just of a planet in physical decay, but of a spiritual ecosystem collapsing. Animals turned against one another. Humans became more violent, more depraved, more disconnected from their divine origin. The harmony of creation had fractured. Something had to be done. It's here that a terrifying and beautiful truth emerges. Divine judgment, while severe, can also be redemptive. In its purest form, it is a reset not driven by vengeance but by love for what was once pure. When the Creator finally acted, it was not to destroy for destruction's sake but to save what remained of humanity and to give the earth a chance to breathe again. The final blow: giants turn against giants. According to the heavenly decree, Gabriel was commanded to stir up conflict among the Nephilim. These towering monsters, born of angelic lust and human flesh, were turned against one another. Civil war broke out among the giants. What followed was chaos beyond comprehension. Titans battled in fields that shook beneath their feet. Mountains crumbled under their weight. The sky itself seemed to recoil in horror as unnatural creatures tore each other apart. It is poetic justice in the cruelest sense. That which was born from violence met its end by violence. The Nephilim, once kings of the earth, could not escape the wrath written into their very nature. One could argue, was this not also an act of mercy? The earth could no longer sustain their presence. Humanity could not survive their rule. By letting the Nephilim destroy one another, God allowed their fall to mirror their rise through pride, through power, through destruction. It's a chilling but timeless lesson. That power built on corruption will always collapse in on itself. Evil, when left unchecked, consumes not only the innocent but itself. Azazel's imprisonment, the fall of the corrupter. Meanwhile, Azazel the arch-corrupter was seized by Raphael and cast into the pit of Dudiel. This desert place, filled with jagged stones and burning heat, was not just a physical prison but a spiritual exile. Azazel, who had taught war, vanity, and forbidden arts, was to lie in darkness, his face covered, his voice silenced until the day of judgment. Azazel's fall is both personal and symbolic. He represents a spirit that still haunts the modern world, the glamorization of sin, the weaponization of knowledge, and the exploitation of beauty for control. He didn't kill with his hands, he corrupted with ideas. He whispered power into the ears of men and watched the world unravel. There's something haunting about the fact that Azazel wasn't destroyed, only restrained. It suggests that his influence, his legacy, still echoes through history. Indeed, his name would later appear in various mythologies and traditions, often associated with scapegoats, wilderness, and forsakenness. We should ask ourselves, what Azazels do we still follow? What voices still entice us toward pride, violence, and false beauty? The Watcher's doom, fallen and forgotten. Simjaza and the other Watchers, once glorious angels, were now bound beneath the earth. They would no longer gaze upon the stars they once helped name, nor walk among the clouds. Instead, they were condemned to witness the death of their children and rot in silence until the great day of judgment. One of the most haunting scenes in the Book of Enoch is the Watchers' final plea. Stripped of their power, they beg Enoch, yes, the man who would soon rise as God's messenger, to intercede on their behalf. Think about that. Mighty angels, once exalted, now pleading with a mortal. It is a complete reversal of roles and a powerful image of how far they had fallen. Yet when Enoch carries their petitions to the Most High, the response is chilling. Their prayers are denied. God, in his wisdom, does not forget mercy, but he also upholds justice. The Watchers had crossed a line not even angels could return from. Their punishment was not cruelty, it was the logical consequence of their betrayal. They had tried to elevate themselves above the divine order, and in doing so, had plunged creation into ruin. Enter Enoch, the chosen scribe of heaven. Amidst the ruin and sorrow, a figure arises, not a warrior, not a king, but a humble man named Enoch. He is a beacon of righteousness in a time when even the stars had turned their backs. Enoch walked with God not just in prayer but in purpose. He was blameless, not because he was perfect, but because he listened, obeyed, and remained faithful when others fell. It's significant that Enoch is chosen not for his power, but for his humility. In a world where giants ruled and angels fell, it is a quiet, obedient man who is invited into heaven to witness divine secrets. Enoch becomes the intermediary, the bridge between heaven and earth. God does not speak directly to the Watchers, nor to the people, but through Enoch, who is taken into the heavenly realms to receive visions, commands, and prophecies. This moment is pivotal. It marks the beginning of Enoch's transformation from mortal man to divine messenger. He will not only observe the judgments being carried out, he will record them, warn humanity, and ensure that future generations understand what transpired. This gives us a powerful reminder: you don't need to be powerful to be chosen. You need to be faithful. In an age obsessed with influence, status, and spectacle, the story of Enoch is a quiet rebellion against the world's values. God does not need the loudest voice, he seeks the most willing heart. The coming flood, a cleansing of the earth. As Enoch continues to receive divine visions, he is shown the great flood, a cosmic deluge that will wash away the stains of sin and wipe the earth clean. This is not just a punishment but a purification. God declares that everything the Watchers and their children corrupted will be undone. The earth will be reborn, humanity will have a second chance, and the divine covenant will be restored through one man, Noah. Noah, like Enoch, is chosen for his righteousness, and through Enoch he is warned of what is to come. The flood is not sudden or arbitrary, it is preceded by revelation, by instruction, by grace. This part of the story carries a timeless truth: before judgment there is always warning. Before wrath there is always mercy. God does not delight in destruction, he desires redemption. But when redemption is rejected, judgment becomes inevitable. The hidden wisdom of the heavens. Enoch is shown not only the coming flood, but the structure of the universe, the courses of the stars, the storehouses of wind and rain, the foundations of the earth. He learns that the cosmos is not random but divinely ordered. Even time itself, seasons, years, and cosmic cycles are part of a celestial clock, ticking according to divine will. This is not just poetic imagery, it is theology. It's a reminder that we live in a world of patterns, laws, and rhythms. That chaos, when it arrives, is not part of the original design but a disruption of it. In a world obsessed with randomness and relativity, the Book of Enoch offers a bold declaration: the universe has a purpose. And if we listen closely, we can hear its harmony. Enoch's revelations are not just apocalyptic, they're instructional. He learns how angels govern the elements, how stars follow fixed paths, and how human history is woven into the fabric of eternity. This level of cosmic insight was revolutionary. It made Enoch not only a prophet, but a proto-scientist, a spiritual astronomer, a man who read the heavens like scripture and saw in them the fingerprints of the Creator. Lessons from the Watchers, warnings for all time. So what are we to make of all this? Is this merely myth, or is it a divine parable meant to awaken something deep within us? Here are some enduring lessons that emerge from Enoch's tale. Not all knowledge is beneficial if pursued without wisdom. Just because something can be known doesn't mean it should be. The Watchers' fatal flaw was not their curiosity but their arrogance. Power, when divorced from love and restraint, becomes tyranny. The Nephilim ruled with strength but without compassion. They mirror every empire, corporation, or system that values might over morality. Even angels can fall and even mortals can rise. The fall of the Watchers and the rise of Enoch show that spiritual hierarchy is not about origin, but about obedience. Divine justice is not vengeance, it is restoration. The flood was not the end of the world. It was the beginning of a new one. Judgment clears the way for grace. A new vision, the final judgment begins. As Enoch's journey ascends deeper into the heavenly realms, his visions become more profound, more terrifying, and more radiant. He is no longer merely a messenger between God and the fallen angels, he is now a scribe of eternity, entrusted with secrets that span not just the age of the Watchers, but all of human destiny. In the chambers of heaven, surrounded by blazing lights and celestial beings, Enoch is shown the throne of the Most High. There he sees multitudes of righteous spirits, clothed in white, who will one day inherit a kingdom not built by human hands. He is told of a final reckoning, when all souls, human and divine, will be judged according to their deeds, their intentions, and their allegiance. The Book of Enoch offers something remarkable here: a panoramic view of the end of days that predates the Book of Revelation. It speaks of resurrection, of eternal reward, and of a Messiah, a chosen one who will sit on a throne of glory and judge both the living and the dead. This is not myth. This is a cosmic courtroom. And all of creation stands trial. The chosen one, a figure of redemption and justice. In one of the most powerful and prophetic moments of the text, Enoch sees a vision of the Son of Man, seated beside the Ancient of Days. This exalted figure is described as radiant, like a blazing light, full of wisdom and righteousness. He will judge kings and mighty ones, he will overthrow evil, and he will be the hope of the nations. Sound familiar? Centuries before the birth of Jesus, the Book of Enoch introduces a messianic figure who mirrors the very Christ described in the Gospels. He is a redeemer, a judge, a shepherd of souls. But he is also the terrifying instrument of justice who will cast down the proud and vindicate the faithful. This duality, mercy and judgment, gentleness and power, is essential. It reminds us that true leadership, divine leadership, is not about domination but restoration. The chosen one is not here to gloat over the fallen, but to lift up the broken, to punish wickedness not out of hatred, but out of a yearning to heal the universe itself. Through this vision, Enoch receives the most sacred assurance of all. Evil will not have the last word. The age of the Watchers, the reign of the giants, the corruption of the earth, these are but dark chapters in a much greater story. A story whose final word is restoration. The fate of the Watchers and the wicked. The heavenly vision then shifts to a dreadful courtroom where the Watchers, still imprisoned, await final judgment. No longer can they plead or bargain. Their fate is sealed. Their crimes corrupting humankind, defiling creation, breaking their celestial vows are eternal stains, and justice will not overlook them. The Watchers are cast into a burning abyss, a place of darkness and fire, described as the Valley of Death. Here they will remain, not merely as punishment but as a monument. A warning to all creation that rebellion against divine order brings ruin not only to oneself, but to all that is touched by it. And yet, the most tragic part of their fall is not their suffering, but their wasted potential. These were once beings of unimaginable beauty and glory, entrusted with the mysteries of heaven. But they chose pride over humility, desire over duty. Their fall wasn't just moral, it was cosmic. Their story is a mirror, one that reflects the subtle ways we too fall. Not through monstrous acts but through small rebellions. Through unchecked pride, hidden lust, quiet defiance. As we read of the Watcher's doom, we are not invited to gloat, but to reflect. The book of life, the destiny of the righteous. In the midst of judgment, another book is opened, the book of life. In it are written the names of those who remained faithful, who resisted corruption, who walked in humility even as the world fell apart around them. These are the ones who will inherit the earth renewed. Enoch sees the reward of the righteous not merely escape from judgment, but elevation to divine glory. They will dwell with the angels, walk in gardens of light, and live forever in the presence of the Holy One. This vision is more than comfort, it's a promise. A reminder that faithfulness is never wasted. That even if the world mocks righteousness, heaven records it. That no act of obedience, however small, is forgotten. For those who suffer, who feel unseen, who endure in silence, this is a message of fire and gold. You are written in the book. You are not forgotten. The mystery of the luminaries, order in the heavens. Enoch is then shown another vision, this time of the sun, the moon, the stars, and the cosmic calendar. He learns that all of creation moves in patterns, that the heavens are not random but divinely regulated. He is taught the names of the archangels who govern the elements, the cycles of seasons, the gates of wind and light. This astronomical book within Enoch may seem out of place, but it serves a deep spiritual purpose. It reminds us that God is not a being of chaos, but of order. That the same hand which judges also creates, also sustains, also guides the galaxies. When the world feels like it's falling apart, Enoch invites us to look up. The stars are still in their courses. The sun still rises. The moon still glows. And behind it all, an unshakable intelligence weaves purpose into every atom. Enoch's transformation, from mortal to Metatron. As his journey nears its end, Enoch undergoes a transformation. He is no longer merely a man. In some traditions, especially Jewish mysticism, he becomes Metatron, the highest of the archangels. A being who sits near the throne of God, recording the deeds of all living things. Whether or not one accepts this mystical identity, the symbolism is powerful. Enoch represents what humanity can become when aligned with the divine. He is proof that we are not just dust, we are potential. We are called to ascend. His story shows that holiness is not separation from life, but immersion in it with purity, with clarity, with purpose. Enoch lived among sinners, yet remained unstained. He walked among giants, yet bowed only to God. And because of this, he was taken not in death, but in glory. Enoch's ascension is a foreshadowing of resurrection, of divine adoption, of our ultimate destiny. It's the divine whisper, this too can be you. A prophetic legacy, echoes into the future. Though Enoch lived thousands of years ago, his message has echoed through every generation. He is quoted in the New Testament, his writings revered by early Christians, his visions preserved even after his book was hidden from many canons. Why? Because Enoch speaks to every age where darkness rises and people wonder, has God abandoned us? He answers, no. He sees. He acts. He restores. His story reminds us that evil is not eternal, that judgment is not without hope, and that righteousness, though often silent, is never in vain. In a world where ancient angels once fell, where giants ruled, and where mankind stood on the edge of annihilation, one man dared to walk with God. That is the legacy of Enoch. Final reflections: what the Watchers teach us today. Now that we've walked the fourfold path of this tale, from the descent of the Watchers to the flood of judgment, from Enoch's rise to the final vision, what do we take with us? Here are 5 final reflections. Spiritual gifts can become spiritual weapons. The Watchers were given divine knowledge but misused it. In our world today, power and influence must be stewarded with humility and discernment. Judgment is not the opposite of love, it is an expression of it. God's wrath flows from his desire to protect what is good. When he acts in justice, he is defending the innocent and restoring harmony. We are all watchers of something. Whether you're a parent, a leader, a teacher, or just a friend, you are entrusted with others. Guard that trust. Don't betray it. Even in the darkest age, one righteous life matters. Enoch wasn't a warrior, but he changed the course of history. Your faithfulness may be hidden, but heaven sees it. The heavens still speak. Enoch saw patterns in the stars, voices in the wind, and meaning in the seasons. Look up. Listen. The Creator is still speaking through creation. Now that you've journeyed through this forgotten epic, ask yourself, what legacy will you leave? Will you live for temporary glory like the Watchers? Will you chase forbidden fires like the Nephilim? Or will you walk like Enoch in faith, in obedience, in light? The Book of Enoch is not just ancient scripture, it's a mirror. It reveals who we were, who we are, and who we're meant to become. So share this story. Reflect on it. Let it stir your soul. And above all, remember, the heavens are watching. The earth is groaning. And you are being written into the book of life. Make sure your chapter is one worth reading for eternity.